Elizabeth Robbins. I am TJ, and that was my fault. All of the actors you'll be hearing tonight are volunteering their time and their talents from their home to bring a little bit of entertainment to your homes. We want to thank them very much for joining us. We'd like to give a special thanks to Ashley and Haley, our interpreting interns for this evening. We would also like to thank, as always, our friend, your friendly neighborhood Shakespeare, for hosting this on his pages. You can check out his website at shakespeareapproves.com or his Patreon at patreon.com/Shakespeare. You can find out more about him at the aforementioned website or by visiting his Facebook page, Shakespeare Approves, your friendly neighborhood Shakespeare. As always, we want to acknowledge and thank all of the medical professionals and essential workers who have been working tirelessly to keep us all as healthy and safe and vaccinated as possible. If you are interested in more information about us and our totally volunteer organization, check out our website, zenithplayers.com. Feel very free to check out our very attractive donations page. 100% of all donations go towards production costs, which will help us to prevent mistakes like the title being wrong when we first go live. If you would like to read with us in future projects, just send us an email at casting@zenithplayers.com and we will get you on board. Join us next Saturday as we present Dear Brutus by J.M. Barrie. Maybe swearing will help. You may know J.M. Barrie as the author of Peter Pan, but we'll be doing Dear Brutus next Saturday. For now, though, relax and enjoy Jacqueline Hume as Vida Levering, Marina Cole as Lady John Wednesday, Heba Tulan as Miss Jean Dunbarton, Haley Height as the voice of Miss Jean Dunbarton, Andrew Gellos as the Honorable Geoffrey Stoner, Shakira Searle as the Honorable Richard Farnborough and Mr. Alan Trent, Noah Stanzione as Lord John Wednesday and Mr. Pilcher, Emily Durango as Mrs. Harriot, Steve Anderson as Mr. St. John Greatorex, Emily Hood as Mrs. Freddie Turnbridge, Mira Singer as Miss Ernestine Blunt, Andrea Atwood as the chairman, Brian J. Applegate as the butler, with additional voices provided by Paula K. Long, Brian J. Applegate, Andrea Atwood, and Mira Singer in Votes for Women. Act 1, the Hall of Wednesday House. 12 o'clock Sunday morning, end of June. Enter the butler. As he's going to answer the door, enter from the garden by the lower French window, Lady John Wednesday, flushed and flapping a garden hat to fan herself.
Brian here.
Has Miss Levering come down yet?
I haven't seen her, my lady.
I won't have her disturbed if she's resting. She certainly needs it.
Yes, my lady.
But I want her to know the moment she comes down that the new plans arrived by the morning post.
Plans, my lady.
She'll understand. There they are. It is very important she should have them in time to look over before she goes. Is that Miss Levering?
No, my lady. Mr. Farnborough.
Butler exits as the Honorable Mr. Farnborough enters.
I'm afraid I'm scandalously early. It didn't take me nearly as long to motor over as Lord John said.
I'm afraid my husband is no authority at motoring, and he's not home yet from church.
It's the greatest luck finding you. I thought Miss Levering was the only person under this roof who was ever allowed to observe Sunday as a real day of rest.
If you've come to see Miss Levering...
Ah, is she here? I give you my word, I didn't know it.
Oh.
Does she come every weekend?
Whenever we can get her to, but we've only known her a couple of months.
Ah, and I have only known her 3 weeks. Lady John, I've come to ask you to help me.
With Miss Levering? I can't do it!
No, that's no good. She only laughs.
She looks upon you as a boy.
Such rot. What do you think she said to me in London the other day?
That she was 4 years older than you?
Oh, I knew that. No, she said that she knew she was all the charming things I'd been saying. But there was only one way to prove it, and that was to marry someone young enough to be her son. She'd noticed that was what the most attractive women did. And she did name names.
You were too old.
Her future husband, she said, was probably just entering Eton.
Oh, just like her.
No. I wanted to see you about the secretaryship.
You didn't get it then?
No, it's the grief of my life.
No, if you don't get one, you'll get another.
Ah, but there is only one.
Only one vacancy?
Only one man I'd give my ears to work for.
I remember.
Do I always talk about Stoner? Well, it's a habit people have got into.
I forget. Do you know Mr. Stoner personally, or are you just dazzled from afar?
No, I know him. The trouble is, he doesn't know me. If he did, he'd realize he can't be sure of winning his election without my valuable services.
Oh, Geoffrey Stoner's re-election is always a foregone conclusion.
That the great man shares that opinion is precisely his weak point. His only one.
You think because the Liberals swept the country the last time...
How can we be sure any Conservative seat is safe after... Forgive me. I know you're not interested in politics qua politics, but this concerns Geoffrey Stoner.
And you count on my being interested in him like all the rest of my sex?
Lady John, I've heard the news.
What news?
That your little niece, the Scottish heiress, is going to become Mrs. Geoffrey Stoner.
Who told you that?
Oh, please don't mind my knowing.
She has set her heart upon having a few days with just her family in the secret before the flood of congratulations broke loose.
Oh, that's all right. I always hear things before other people.
Well, I must ask you to be good enough to be very circumspect. I wouldn't have my niece think that I...
Oh, of course not.
She will be here in an hour.
What, today? The future Mrs. Stoner?
Yes! Unfortunately, we had one or two people already asked for the weekend.
And I go and invite myself to luncheon. Lady John, you can buy me off. I will promise to remove myself in 5 minutes if you...
No, the penalty is you shall stay and keep the others amused between church and luncheon. And so leave me free. Only remember...
Wild horses won't get a hint out of me. I only mentioned it to you because since we've come back to live in this part of the world, you've been so awfully kind. I hoped maybe you'd put in a word for me.
With?
With your nephew that is to be. Though I'm not the slavish satellite people make out. You can't doubt.
Oh, I don't doubt. But you know Mr. Stoner inspires a similar enthusiasm in a good many young...
They haven't studied the situation as I have. They don't know what's at stake. They don't go to that whole Dutfield as I did just to hear his Friday speech.
Ah, but you were rewarded. Jean, my niece, wrote me it was glorious.
Well, I was disappointed. He's too content just to criticize, just to make his delicate, pungent fun of the men who are grappling. Very inadequately, of course. Still grappling with the big questions. There's a carrying power. Some of Stoner's friends ought to point it out. There's a driving power in the poorest constructive policy that makes the most brilliant criticism look barren.
And who told you that?
You think there's nothing in it because I say it. But now that he's coming into the family, Lord John or somebody really ought to point out Stoner's overdoing his role of magnificent security.
I don't see even Lord John offering to instruct Mr. Stoner.
Believe me, that's just Stoner's danger. Nobody saying a word, everybody hoping that he's on the point of adopting some definite line, something strong and original that's going to fire the public imagination and bring the Tories back into power.
So he will.
Not if he disappoints meetings, goes calmly up to town and leaves the field to the Liberals.
When did he do anything like that?
Yesterday. And now that he's got this other preoccupation.
You mean?
Yes, your niece, that spoiled child of fortune. Of course, she kept him from the meeting last night. Well, if that's the effect she's going to have, it's pretty serious.
You are.
I could assure you the election agent's more so. He's simply tearing his hair.
How do you know?
He told me so himself yesterday. I scraped acquaintance with the agent just to see if...
It's not only here that you maneuver for the secretaryship.
You never can tell when your chance might come. That election chap's promised to keep me posted.
The door flies open and Jean Dunbarton rushes in.
Aunt Ellen, here,
My dear child.
And to Lord John from the garden.
I thought that was you running up the avenue.
How did you get here so early?
I knew you'd be surprised. Wasn't it clever of me to manage it? I don't deserve all the credit.
But there isn't any train between.
Yes. Wait till I tell you.
You walked in the broiling sun?
No.
You must be dead. Why didn't you telegraph? I ordered the carriage to meet the 1:10. Didn't you say the 1:10? Yes, I'm sure you did. Here's the letter.
Now they'll tell each other for 10 minutes that she's an hour earlier than we expected.
The Freddie Tunbridges said that they were coming to you this week.
Yes, they're dawdling through the park with the church brigade.
Oh. I'll go and meet them.
Exit Farnborough.
That discreet young man will get on.
But how did you get here?
He motored me down.
Geoffrey Stoner? Why, where is he then?
He dropped me off at the end of the avenue. Then he went on to see a supporter about something.
You let him go off like that without...
Just tell me, my child, is it all right?
My engagement? Yes, absolutely.
Geoffrey Stoner isn't going to be a little too old for you?
Bless me. Am I such a chicken?
24 used to be not so young, but it's become so.
Yes, we don't grow up so quick. But, on the other hand, we stay up longer.
You've got what's vulgarly called looks, my dear, and that will help to keep you up.
I know what Uncle John's thinking. But I'm not the only girl who's been left what's vulgarly called money.
You're the only one of our immediate circle who's been left so beautifully much.
Yes, but remember, Geoffrey could... Everybody knows. Geoffrey could have married anyone in England.
I'm afraid everybody does know it, not excepting Mr. Stoner.
Well, how spoiled is the great man?
Not the least bit in the world. You'll see. He so wants to know my best beloved relations better. An orphan has so few belongings. She has to make the most of them.
Let us hope he'll approve of us on more intimate acquaintance.
He will. He's an angel. Why, he gets on with my grandfather.
Does he? You mean to say Mr. Geoffrey Stoner isn't just a tiny bit superior about dissenters?
Not half as much as Uncle John, and all the rest of you.
Oh.
My grandfather's been ill again. You know, and rather difficult. Bless him. But Geoffrey...
He must have powers of persuasion to get that old Covenanter to let you come in an abhorred motor car on Sunday, too.
Grandfather didn't know.
Didn't know?
I honestly meant to come by train. Geoffrey met me on the way to the station. We had the most glorious run. Oh, Aunt Ellen, we're so happy. I've so looked forward to having you to myself the whole day, just to talk to you about...
Oh, very well.
You'd find it dreadfully dull to hear me talk about Geoffrey the whole blessed day.
Well, till luncheon, my dear. You mustn't mind if I... Miss Levering wasn't only tired last night, she was ill.
I thought she looked very white.
Who is Miss... You don't mean to say that there are other people?
One or two. Your uncle's responsible for asking that old cynic, St. John Greatorex.
Mr. Greatorex. He's a radical, isn't he?
Jean, beginning to think in parties.
It's very natural now that she should.
I only meant it was odd he should be here. Naturally, at my grandfather's.
It's all right, my child. Of course, we expect now that you'll begin to think like Geoffrey Stoner, and to feel like Geoffrey Stoner, and to talk like Geoffrey Stoner, and quite proper too.
Well, if I do think with my husband and feel with him, as of course I shall, it will surprise me if I ever find myself talking a tenth of as well. You should have heard him at Dutfield. Oh, the Freddie Tunbridges? What? Not Aunt Lydia. Oh,
Enter the Tunbridges.
What a delightful surprise.
I'm so glad. How do you do, Mr. Freddie?
Enter Lady John's sister, Mrs. Harriet, followed by Farnborough.
My dear Jean, my darling child.
How do you do, Aunt?
I wasn't surprised. I always prophesied.
Shh. Please.
We haven't met since you were in short skirts. I'm Dick Farnborough.
Oh, I remember.
Not down yet. The elusive one.
Who is the elusive one?
Lady John's new friend.
Oh, I forgot you hadn't seen Miss Levering. Such a nice creature, don't you think?
Of course I do. You're lucky to get her to come so often. She won't go to other people.
She knows she can rest here.
What does she do to tire her?
She's been helping my sister and me with a scheme of ours.
She certainly knows how to inveigle money out of men.
It would sound less equivocal, Lydia, if you added that the money is to build baths in our shelter for homeless women.
Homeless women?
Yes, in the most insanitary part of Soho.
Oh, really?
It doesn't sound quite in Miss Levering's line.
My dear boy, you know as little about what's in a woman's line as most men.
I say.
Philanthropy in a woman like Miss Levering is a form of restlessness, but she's a nice creature. All she needs is to get some nice fella to marry her.
Yes, a woman needs a balance wheel, if only to keep her from flying back to town on a hot day like this.
Who's proposing anything so...
The elusive one.
Not Miss...
Yes, before luncheon.
She must be in London by this afternoon, she says.
What for, in the name of...
Well, that I didn't ask her, but I think I'll just go up and see if she's changed her plans.
Oh, she must be made such a nice creature. All she needs...
Enter St. John Greatorex, followed by Miss Levering and Farnborough.
I protest. Oh, good Lord, what are the women of this country coming to? I protest against Miss Levering being carried off to discuss anything so revolting. Bless my soul. What can a woman like you know about it?
Little enough. Good morning.
Think so indeed.
You aren't serious about going?
We were so happy out there in the summer house, weren't we?
Ideally.
And to be hailed out to talk about public Sanitation, forsooth. God bless my soul. Do you realize that's trains?
I'm dreadfully afraid it is.
And we in the act of discussing Italian literature. Perhaps you'll tell me that isn't a more savory topic for a lady.
But for the tramp population, less conducive to savoriness, don't you think, than baths?
Oh, I can't understand this morbid interest in vagrants. You're much too... Leave it to the others.
What others?
Oh, the sort of woman who smells of India rubber. The typical English spinster. Oh, you know, and Aethel's full of her. She never goes anywhere without a mackintosh and a collapsible bath rubber. When you look at her, it's borne in upon you that she doesn't only smell of rubber, she's rubber too.
This is my niece, Miss Jean Dunbarton, Miss Levering.
How do you do?
I'm sure you agree with me.
About Miss Levering
For
being
that sort of
too-
thing, much too...
What a pity you've exhausted the more eloquent adjectives.
But I haven't.
Well, you can't say to me as you did to Mrs. Freddie, you're too young and too happily married and too...
For what was Miss Freddie too happily married, and all the rest?
Mr. Greatorex was repudiating the horrid rumor that Mrs. Freddie has been speaking in public about women's trade unions. Wasn't that what you said, Mrs. Harry?
Yes, it isn't made up as carefully as your aunt's parties usually are. Here we've got Greatorex, who hates political women, and we've got in that mild and inoffensive-looking little lady.
She's really...
Oh, and you've got me.
My dear child, he doesn't hate the charming wives and sweethearts who help to win seats.
Mr. Greatorex objects only to the unsexed creatures who,
Yes, who want to act independently of men.
you vote and do silly things of that sort.
Exactly.
It will be a long time before we hear any more of that nonsense.
You mean that rowdy scene in the House of Commons?
Yes. No decent woman will be able to say suffrage without blushing for another generation, thank heaven.
Oh, I understood that so little. I almost imagined people were more stirred up about it than they'd ever been before.
Not people like you.
How do you know?
Oh, bless my soul.
She's saying that only to get a rise out of you.
Yes, your frocks aren't serious enough.
I'm told it's an exploded notion that the suffrage women are all dowdy and dull.
Don't you believe it?
Well, of course, we know you've been an authority on the subject for, let's see, how many years is it you've kept the house in roars whenever women's rights are mentioned?
Oh, as long as I've known anything about politics, there have been a few discontented old maids and hungry widows.
A few. That's really rather forbearing of you, Mr. Greatorex. I'm afraid the number of the discontented and the hungry was 96,000 among the mill operatives alone. At least the paper said so, didn't they?
Oh, don't ask me. That kind of woman doesn't interest me. Oh, I'm afraid I am able to point out to the people who lose their heads and seem inclined to treat the phenomenon seriously. There's absolutely nothing new in it. There have been women for the last 40 years who haven't had anything more pressing to do than petition Parliament.
And that's as far as they've got.
It's as far as they'll ever get.
Let me see. Was it a deputation sent to you not long ago?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, I remember. I thought at the time, in my modest way, it was nothing short of heroic of them to go asking audience of their arch opponent.
It didn't come off.
Oh, I thought they insisted on bearding the lion in his den.
Of course, I wasn't going to be bothered with a lot of...
You don't mean you refused to go out and face them?
I wouldn't have done it for worlds. But a friend of mine went and had a look at him.
Well, did he get back alive?
Yes, but he advised me not to go. You're quite right, he said. Don't you think of bothering, he said. I've looked over the lot, he said, and there isn't a weekender among them.
Do you remember Miss Freddie's friend who came to tea here in the winter? He was a member of Parliament too, quite a little young one. He said women would never be respected till they had the vote.
I remember telling him he was too young to know what he was talking about.
Yes, I'm afraid you all sat on the portrait.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, it was such fun. He was flat as a pancake when we'd done with him. Aunt Ellen told him, with her most distinguished air, that she didn't want to be respected.
My dear Lady John.
Quite right. Awful idea to think that you're respected.
Simply revolting.
Now, you frivolous people, go away. We've only got a few minutes to talk over the terms of the late Mr. Soper's munificence before the carriage comes for Miss Levering.
Did you know she'd got the old horror to give Lady John £8,000 for her charity before he died?
Who got him to?
Miss Levering. He wouldn't do it for me, but she brought him round.
Yes, by Jove, I expect so.
Isn't she wonderful?
Nice creature. All she needs is...
Exit the Tunbridges and Farnborough. Lady John on the far side of the writing table, Mrs. Harriet at the top, Jean and Lord John.
Too wonderful to waste your time on the wrong people.
I shall waste less of my time after this.
I'm relieved to hear it. I can't see you wheedling money for shelters and rot of that sort out of retired grocers.
You see, you call it rot. We couldn't have got £8,000 out of you.
I'm not sure. If I gave you that much for your little projects, what would you give me?
Soper didn't ask that.
Soper, I should think not.
Soper? You two still talking Soper? How flattened the old beggar'd be. Did you hear what Mrs. Harriet said about him? So kind, so munificent, so vulgar, poor soul. We couldn't know him in London, but we shall meet him in heaven.
Greater exit, Lord John, exit.
Sit over there, my dear. You needn't stay, Jean. This won't interest you.
It's only an effort to meet the greatest evil in the world.
What do you call the greatest evil in the world?
The helplessness of women.
Jean, darling, I know you can think of nothing but him, so just go and...
Indeed. I can think of everything better than I ever did before. He has lit up everything for me, made everything vivider, more significant.
Who has?
Oh, yes. I don't care about other things. Less, but 1,000 times more.
You are in love.
Oh, that's it. I congratulate you.
Well, this, you see, obviates the difficulty you've raised.
Yes, quite.
But it's going to cost a great deal more.
It's worth it.
We'll have nothing left for the organ at St. Pilgrim's.
My dear Lydia, we're putting the organ aside.
We can't afford to put aside the elevating effect of music.
What we must make for first is the cheap and humanely conducted lodging house.
There are several of those already, but poor St. Pilgrim.
There are none for the poorest women.
No. Even the excellent Soper was for multiplying Roten houses. You can never get men to realize you can't always get women.
It's the work least able to wait.
I don't agree with you. And I happen to have spent a great deal of my life in works of charity.
Ah, then you'll be interested in the girl I saw dying in a tramp ward a little while ago. Glad her cough was worse, only she mustn't die before her father. 2 reasons. Nobody but her to keep the old man out of the workhouse, and father is so proud. If she died first, he would starve. Worst of all, he might hear what had happened up in London to his girl.
She didn't say, I suppose, how she happened to fall so low.
Yes, she had been in service. She lost the train back one Sunday night and was too terrified of her employer to dare ring him up after hours. The wrong person found her crying on the platform.
She should have gone to one of the friendly societies.
At 11 at night.
And there are the rescue leagues. I, myself, have been connected with one for 20 years.
20 years? Always arriving after the train's gone, after the girl and the wrong person have got the journey's end.
Where is she now?
Never mind.
2 nights ago, she was waiting at a street corner in the rain.
Near a public house, I suppose.
Yes, a sort of public house. She was plainly dying. She was told she shouldn't be out in the rain. I mustn't go in yet, she said. This is what he gave me, and she began to cry. In her hand were 2 pennies silvered over to look like half-crowns.
I don't believe that story. It's just the sort of thing that some sensation monger trumps up. Now, who tells you such...
Several credible people. I didn't believe them till I myself...
Till
last week. I saw for myself.
Saw? Where?
In a low lodging house not 100 yards from the church you want a new organ for.
How did you happen to be there?
I was on a pilgrimage.
a pilgrimage.
Into the underworld.
You went?
How could you?
I put on an old gown and a tawdry hat. You'll never know how many things are hidden from a woman in good clothes. The bold, free look of a man at a woman he believes to be destitute. You must feel that look on you before you can understand. A good half of history.
Jean?
But where did you go, dressed like that?
Down among the homeless women, on a wet night, looking for shelter.
Well, no wonder you've been ill.
And it's like that?
No,
No?
it's so much worse. I dare not tell about it. Even if you weren't here, I couldn't.
You needn't suppose, darling, that those wretched creatures feel it as we would.
The girls who need shelter and work aren't all serving maids.
We know that all the women who make mistakes aren't.
That is why every woman ought to take an interest in this. Every girl, too.
No, this is a matter
Yes.
for us
Oh,
older.
yes. This
Or
is a matter for
for
us
a person who has some special knowledge. We can't pretend to have access to such sources of information as Miss Levering.
Yes, for I can give you access. As you seem to think I have some first-hand knowledge about homeless girls.
Well, my dear, it will all come inconvenient.
It once happened to me to take offense at an ugly thing that was going on under my father's roof. Oh, years ago. I was an impulsive girl. I turned my back on my father's house.
Well, that was ill-advised.
Of course, if a girl does that.
That was what all my relations said, and I couldn't explain.
Not to your mother?
She was dead. I went to London to a small hotel and tried to find employment. I wandered about all day and every day from agency to agency. I was supposed to be educated. I'd been brought up partly in Paris. I could play several instruments and sing little songs in 4 different tongues.
Did nobody want to teach you French or sing the little songs?
The heads of schools thought me too young. There were people ready to listen to my singing, but the terms, they were too hard. Soon my money was gone. I began to pawn my trinkets. They went.
And still no work.
No. But by that time, I had some real education. An unpaid hotel bill and not a shilling in the world. Some girls think it hardship to have to earn their living. The horror is not to be allowed to.
What happened?
My dear, have your things been sent down? Are you quite ready?
Yes, all but my hat.
Well?
Well, by chance I met a friend of my family.
That was lucky.
I thought so. He was nearly 10 years older than I. He said he wanted to help me.
And didn't he?
Perhaps after all he did. Why do I waste time over myself? I belong to the little class of armed women. My body wasn't born weak and my spirit wasn't broken by the habit of slavery. But as Mrs. Harriet was kind enough to hint, I do know something about the possible fate of homeless girls. I found there were pleasant parks, museums, free libraries in our great, rich London, and not one single place where destitute women can be sure of work that isn't killing of food or food that isn't worse than prison fare. That's why women ought not to sleep or nights till this shelter stands spreading out wide arms.
No.
Even when it's built, you'll see. Many of those creatures will prefer the life they lead. They like it.
A woman told me, one of the sort that knows, told the many of them like it so much that they are indifferent to the risk of being sent to prison. It gives them a rest, she said.
A rest?
I want to begin to understand something of... I'm horribly ignorant.
I'm a rather busy person.
I have a quite special reason for wanting not to be ignorant. I'll go to town tomorrow. If you'll come and lunch with me.
Thank you. I must go and put my hat on.
She exits upstairs.
How little she minds all these horrors.
They turn me cold. Ugh. I wonder if she signed the visitor's book.
For all her shelter schemes, she's a hard woman.
Miss Levering is.
Oh, of course you won't think so. She is angled very adroitly for your sympathy.
She doesn't look hard.
I'm not sure, but what she does. Her mouth always like this, as if she were holding back something by main force.
Well, so she is.
Lady John exits.
Why haven't I seen her before?
Oh, she's lived abroad. You don't know about her, I suppose.
I don't know how Aunt Ellen came to know her.
That was my doing, but I didn't bargain for her being introduced to you.
She seems to go everywhere. And why shouldn't she?
You mustn't ask her to Eaton Square.
I have.
Then you'll have to get out of it.
I must have a reason. And a very good reason.
Well, it's not a thing I should have preferred to tell you, but I know how difficult you are to guide. I suppose you'll have to know. It was 10 or 12 years ago. I found her horribly ill in a lonely Welsh farmhouse. We had taken the manor for that August. The farmer's wife was frightened and begged me to go and see what I thought. I soon saw how it was. I thought she was dying.
Dying? What was the...
I got no more out of her than the father's wife did. She had had no letters. There had been no one to see her except a man down from London, a shady-looking doctor, nameless, of course. And then this result. The farmer and his wife, highly respectable people, were incensed. They were for turning the girl out.
Oh, but...
Yes, pitiless some of these people are. I insisted they should treat the girl humanely, and we became friends. That is, sort of. In spite of all I did for her.
What did you do?
I've told you. And I lent her money. No small sum either.
Has she never paid you back?
Oh, yes, after a time. But I always kept her secret, as much as I knew of it.
But you've been telling me.
That was my duty. And I never had her full confidence.
Wasn't it natural she...
Well, all things considered, she might have wanted to tell me who was responsible.
Oh, and Lydia.
All she ever said was that she was ashamed that she hadn't had the courage to resist, not the original temptation, but the pressure brought to bear on her not to go through with it, she said.
You are being so delicate. I'm not sure I understand.
The only thing you need to understand is that she is not a desirable companion for a young girl.
When did you see her? After...
I met her last winter at the Bishop's. She's a connection of his wife's. They'd got her to help with some of their work. Then she took hold of ours. Your aunt and uncle are quite foolish about her, and I'm debarred from taking any steps, at least till the shelter is out of hand.
I do rather wonder. She can bring herself to talk about it. The unfortunate woman of the world.
The effrontery of it.
Or the courage.
Even presumes to set me right. Of course, I don't mind in the least, poor soul, but I feel I owe it to your dead mother to tell you about her, especially as you're old enough now to know something about life.
And since a girl needn't be very old to suffer for her ignorance, I felt she was rather wonderful.
Wonderful!
To have lived through that when she was... how old?
Oh, 19 or thereabouts.
5 years younger than I. To be abandoned and to come out of it like this.
It was too bad to have to tell you such a sordid story, today of all days.
It is a very terrible story. But this wasn't a bad time. I feel very sorry today for women who aren't happy. That's Jeffrey.
Mr. Stoner, what makes you think?
Yes, I'm sure.
Who do you think is motoring up the drive?
Oh, dear. How am I ever going to be able to behave like a girl who isn't engaged to the only man in the world worth marrying?
You were expecting Mr. Stoner all that time?
He promised he'd come to luncheon if it was humanly possible. But I was afraid to tell you for fear he'd be prevented.
You felt we couldn't have borne the disappointment.
I felt I couldn't.
Here's an agreeable surprise.
How do you do?
Yes, by Jove. What gigantic luck.
What do you do?
Such a long time since we met.
You're growing very enterprising. I could hardly believe my ears when I heard you'd motored all the way from town to see a supporter on Sunday.
I don't know how we covered the ground in the old days. It's no use to stand for your borough anymore. The American, you know, he runs for Congress. By and by, we shall all be flying after the thing we want.
All sorts of irrelevant people are here.
How do you do, Mr. Stoner?
How do you do?
Some of them were arguing in the smoking room last night whether it didn't hurt a man's chances going about in a motor.
Yes, we've been hearing a lot of stories about the unpopularity of motor cars among the class that hasn't got them, of course. What do you say?
I'm sure you'd gain more votes by being able to reach so many more of your constituency than we used to.
Well, I don't know. I've sometimes wondered whether the charm of our presence wasn't counterbalanced by the way we tear about smothering our fellow beings in dust and running down their pigs and chickens, not to speak of their children.
What, on the whole, are the prospects?
We shall have to work harder than we realized.
Ah.
He says he believes I'll be able to make a real difference to his chances. Isn't it angelic of him?
Angelic? Machiavellian. I pin all my hopes on your being able to counteract the pernicious influence of my opponent's glib wife.
You want me to have a real share in it all, don't you, Jeffrey?
Of course I do.
I don't gather you're altogether sanguine. Any complication?
Well, there's this agitation about the woman question. Oddly enough, it seems likely to affect the issue.
Why should it? Can't you do what the other 400 have done?
Easily. But you see, the mere fact that 420 members have been worried into promising support, and then once the House have let the matter severely alone...
Let it alone? Bless my soul, I should think so indeed.
Of course. It's only a device that's somewhat worn.
Still, if they think they're getting a future cabinet minister on their side.
It will be sufficiently embarrassing for the cabinet minister.
You know one another.
Everybody in this part of the world knows Mr. Stoner, but he doesn't know me.
Miss Levern.
Bow as Greater X enters.
Oh, have you been hearing him speak?
Yes, I was visiting some relations near Dutfield. They took me to hear you.
Oh, the night the suffragettes made their customary row.
The night they asked you.
Ah, well, Mrs. Freddy, what do you think of your new friends now?
My friends,
Yes, the disorderly women.
they are not my friends, but I don't think you must call them.
Why not? I can forgive them for worrying the late government, but they are disorderly.
Isn't the phrase consecrated to a different class?
He's perfectly right. How do you do it? Disorderly women, that's what they are.
Ought to be looked up, every one of them.
Public nuisances. Going on about with dog whips and spitting in policemen's faces.
I wonder if they did spit.
Of course they did.
You're no authority on what they do. You run away.
Run away? Yes. And if ever I muster up courage to come back, it will be to vote for better manners in public life. Not worse than we have already.
So should I. Don't think that I defend the suffragette methods.
Still, are you an advocate of the suffrage? Aren't you?
I don't beat the air.
Only policemen.
If you cared to know the attitude of the real workers in the reform, you might have noticed in any paper last week, we lost no time in disassociating ourselves from the little group of hysterical.
They have lowered the whole sex in the eyes of the entire world.
Can't quite see what they want, those suffragettes.
Notoriety.
What they want? A good thrashing. That's what I'd give them.
Spirited fellow.
Well, there's one sure thing. They've dished their goose. I believe these silly scenes are a pure joy.
Final death blow to the whole silly business.
Suffragettes, they don't seem to know they're dead.
Oh, they still keep up a sort of death rattle, but they've done for themselves.
I hope they'll last till the election's over.
Why?
Oh, we want them to get the working man to vote for the Conservative candidate. Isn't that so?
Fancy, Jean.
The working man's a good deal of an ass, but even he won't listen to...
But he does listen, like anything. I asked why there were so few at the Long Mitcham meeting, and I was told, oh, they've all gone to hear Miss...
Just for a lark, that was.
It has no real effect on the vote.
Not the smallest.
Why, I thought you said...
I've a notion a little soap and water wouldn't do me any harm.
I'll take you up. You know Freddie Tunbridge.
Exit Stoner, Lord John, and Freddie.
Well, if women are of no importance in politics, it isn't for the reason you gave. There is now and then a weekender among them.
The perils that beset the feet of a man.
Why does he behave like that?
His moral sense is shocked.
Why, I saw him and Miss Freddy together at the French play the other night. as thick as thieves.
Ah, that was before he knew her revolting views.
What revolting views.
Sunday.
I can't believe women are so helpless when I see men so afraid of them.
The great mistake was in teaching them to read and write.
Say something.
Oh no, that wasn't the worst mistake.
Yes, it was.
No, believe me, the mistake was in letting women learn to talk.
Ah, I see now what's to be the next great reform.
When the women are all dumb, no more discussion of the paradiso.
The thing itself is a great deal better than talking about it, as I'm sure you know.
Why do you think I know?
Only the plain women are in any doubt. Wait for me, Farnborough. I cannot go about unprotected.
Farnborough and Greater X.
It's true what the old cynic says. The scene in the house has put back the reform a generation.
I wish I'd been there.
I was.
Oh, was it like the papers said?
Worse. I've never been so moved in public. No tragedy, no great opera ever gripped an audience as the situation in the house did that night. There we all sat breathless, with everything more favorable to us than it had been within the memory of women. Another 5 minutes and the resolution would have passed. Then, all in a moment.
Listen, they're talking about the female hooligans.
No, thank you.
All in a moment, a horrible, dingy little flag was poked through the grille of the women's gallery. Cries, insults, scuffling, the police, the ignominious turning out of the women, us, as well as the... Oh, I can't think of it without... Then the next morning, the people gloating, our friends, antagonized people who were wavering, nearly won over, all thrown back, heart-breaking. Even my husband. Freddie's been an angel about letting me take my share when I felt I must, but of course, I've always known he doesn't really like it. It makes him shy. I'm sure it gives him a horrid twist inside when he sees my name among the speakers on the placards. But he's always been an angel about it before this. After the disgraceful scene, he said, "It just shows how unfit women are for any sort of coherent thinking or concerted action."
To think that it should be a woman who've given the cause the worst blow it ever had.
The work of 40 years destroyed in 5 minutes.
They must have felt pretty sick when they woke up the next morning, the suffragettes.
I don't waste any sympathy on them. I'm thinking of the penalty all women have to pay because of a handful of hysterical...
Still, I think I feel sorry for them. It must be dreadful to find you've done such a lot of harm to the thing you care most about in the world.
Do you picture the suffragettes sitting in sackcloth?
Well, they can't help realizing now what they've done.
Isn't it just possible that they realize they've waked up interest in the woman question so that it's advertised in every paper and discussed in every house from Land's End to John O'Groats? Don't you think they know there's been more said and written about it in these 10 days since the scene than in the 10 years before it?
You aren't saying you think it was a good way to get what they wanted.
I'm only pointing out that it seems not such a bad way to get it known they do want something and want it bad.
Didn't Mr. Greatorex say women had been politely petitioning Parliament for 40 years?
And men have only laughed.
But they'd come round. Mrs. Tunbridge says before that horrid scene, everything was favorable at last.
At last. Hadn't it been just as favorable before?
No. We never had so many members pledged to our side.
I thought I'd heard somebody say the bill had got as far as that, time and time again.
Oh, no, surely not.
Yes. This was only a resolution. The bill passed a second reading 37 years ago.
And what difference did it make?
The men laughed rather louder.
Oh, it's got as far as a second reading several times. But we never had so many friends in the house before.
Friends.
Why do you say it like that?
Perhaps because I was thinking of a funny story. He said it was funny. A Liberal whip told me the other day a Radical member went out after the House, after his speech in favor of the women's bill, and he came back half an hour later. He heard some members talking in the lobby about the astonishing number who were going to vote for the measure. And the friend of woman dropped his jaw and clutched the man next him. "My God," he said, "you don't mean to say they're going to give it to them."
Oh.
You don't think all men in Parliament are like that?
I don't think all men are burglars, but I lock my doors.
You think, that night of the scene, you think the men didn't mean to play fair?
Didn't the women sit quiet till 10 minutes to closing time?
10 minutes to settle a question like that?
Mrs. Freddy, couldn't you see the men were at their old game?
You think they were just putting off the issue till it was too late?
I wasn't there. But I haven't heard anybody deny that the women waited till 10 minutes to 11. Then they discovered the policeman who had been sent up at the psychological moment to the back of the gallery. Then I'm told, when the women saw they were betrayed once more, they utilized the few minutes left to impress on the country at large the fact of their demands. Did it in a way, the only way, left them. It does rather look to the outsider as if the well-behaved women had worked for 40 years and made less impression on the world than those fiery young women made in 5 minutes.
Oh, come, be fair.
Well, you must admit that next day, every newspaper reader in Europe and America knew there were women in England in such dead earnest about the suffrage that the men had stopped laughing at last and turned them out of the house. Men even advertised how little they appreciated the fun by sending the women to jail in pretty sober earnest, and all the world was talking about it.
I have noticed whenever the men aren't there, the women sit and discuss that scene.
Well, I shan't have to wait until the men are gone. He's in sympathy
How do you know?
He told the interrupting woman so.
Oh.
Here's Freddie. You're judging them from the outside. Those of us who have been working for years, we all realize it was a perfectly lunatic proceeding. I think the only chance of our getting what we want is by winning over the men. What's the matter?
Winning over the men has been the woman's way for centuries. Do you think the result should make us proud of our policy? Yes? Then go and walk in Piccadilly at midnight. No, I forgot.
Yes. It's not the first time you've forgotten.
I forgot the magistrate's ruling. He said no decent woman had any business to be in London's main thoroughfare at night unless she has a man with her. I heard that in Nine Elms too. You're obliged to take up with a chap, was what the woman said.
Jean, come.
My dear, I think Lydia Harriet's right. We oughtn't to do anything or say anything to encourage this ferment of feminism, and I'll tell you why. It's likely to bring a very terrible thing in its train.
What terrible thing?
Sex antagonism.
It's here.
Oh, don't say that.
You're so conscious it's here, you're afraid to have it mentioned.
If it's here, is the fault of those women agitators.
No woman begins that way. Every woman's in a state of natural subjection. No, I'd rather say allegiance to her idea of romance and her hope of womanhood, motherhood. They're embodied for her in man. They're the strongest things in life. Till man kills them. Let's be fair. Each woman knows why that allegiance dies.
Lady John turns hastily, sees Lord John coming down with Mr. Freddie, and meets them at the foot of the stairs. Miss Levering has turned to the table looking for her gloves, and among the papers, unconsciously drops the handkerchief she had in her little book.
All this talk against the wicked suffragettes makes me want to go and hear what they've got to say for themselves.
Well, they're holding a meeting in Trafalgar Square at 3:00.
This afternoon. But that's no use to the people out of town. Unless I could invent some excuse.
Still talking over the shelter plan.
No, we left the shelter some time ago.
Then what's all the excitement about?
The latest thing in Wales.
It's a very proper topic.
Yes, the invincible frivolity of woman. Oh, I was afraid you'd despise us for it.
Not at all. Not at all.
Oh, they're coming for you. Don't forget your book.
And holds out a salver with a telegram on it for Jean.
It's for me.
But it's time I was.
May I? I've got your book. Dante, whereabouts are you? Oh, the Inferno.
No, I'm in a worse place.
I didn't know there was a worse place.
Yes, it's worse with the Vigliacci.
I forget. Were they Guelph or Ghibelline?
They weren't either, and that was why Dante couldn't stand them. He said there was no place in heaven nor in purgatory, not even a corner in hell, for the souls who had stood aloof from strife. He called them wretches who never lived. Dante did because they never felt the pangs of partisanship, and so they wander homeless on the skirts of limbo among the abortions and offscourings of creation.
Aunt Ellen, I've got to go to London.
Stoner re-enters.
My dear child.
Nonsense! Is your grandfather worse?
No, I don't think so. But it's necessary I should go, all the same.
Go away when Mr. Stoner...
He said I'd have to leave directly after luncheon.
I'll just see Miss Levering off, and then I'll come back and talk about it.
Why are you saying goodbyes if you are never coming back?
One never knows. Maybe I shan't come back. Goodbye.
There mayn't be another train. Miss Levering.
What if there isn't? I'll take you back in the motor.
Will you? I must be there by 3.
Why, it's only an invitation to dine Wednesday. Oh, I see. It's rather dear of you to arrange our going off like that. You are a clever girl.
It's not that I was arranging. I want to hear those women in Trafalgar Square. The suffragettes.
How perfectly absurd. Besides, I expect she wouldn't like my carrying you off like that.
Then she'll have to make an excuse and come too.
Oh, it wouldn't be quite the same.
We could get back here in time for dinner.
Jeffrey Stoner glances down at the handkerchief still in his hand and turns it half mechanically from corner to corner.
Mine?
No,
Hands it to Miss Levering as she passes.
yours.
But that's not an L. It's V.
Come, Vida, since you will go.
Yes, I'm coming.
She exits.
I didn't know her name was Vida. How did you?
End of Act 1. Act 2. Trafalgar Square.
I've got boys of my own, and we laugh at all sorts of things, but I should be ashamed, and so would they, if ever they was to behave as you are doing today. People have been saying this is a middle-class women's movement. It's a libel. I'm a working woman myself, the wife of a working man.
Poor devil.
I'm a poor
Think of
law
that
guardian
now.
and a...
Gracious me,
Oh, shut up, can't ya?
not for you.
Go home and don your old man's stockings.
Clean your own doorstep.
It's a poor sort of housekeeper that leaves her doorstep till Sunday afternoon. Maybe that's when you would do your doorstep. I do mine in the morning before you men are awake.
It's true what she says, every
You
word.
say we women have got no business serving on boards and thinking about politics. What's politics? It's just housekeeping on a big scale. Who among you working men has most comfortable homes? Those of you that gives your wives your wages.
Wanting our money. Lord, I housekeeper of England.
If it was only to use for our comfort, do you think many of you working men would be found turning over their wages to their wives? No. What's the reason thousands do? And the best and the soberest? Because the working man knows that what's a pound to him is 20 shilling to his wife. and she'll make every penny in one of them shillings tell. She gets more for him out of his wages than what he can. Some of you know what the homes is like, where the men don't let the women manage. Well, the poor laws in the old government is just like in the same muddle because the men have tried to do the national housekeeping without the women. But, like I told you before, it's a libel to say it's only the well-off women what's wanting the vote. What about the 96,000 textile workers? What about the Yorkshire tailoresses? I can tell you what plenty of the poor women think about it. I'm one of them, and I can tell you, we see there's reforms needed. We ought to have the vote. And we know how to appreciate the other women who go to prison for trying to get it for us.
Shut up. Keep quiet, can't you?
You evidently don't know what had to be done by men before the extension of the suffrage in 67. If it hadn't been for the demonstrations
You say
of
women's
violence...
place is home. Don't you know there's a third of the women of this country can't afford the luxury of staying in their homes? They got to go out and out make money to pay the rent and keep the home from being sold up. Then there's all the women that haven't even got miserable homes. They haven't got any homes at all.
You said you got one. Why don't you stop it?
Yes, that's like a man. If one of you is alright, he thinks the rest don't matter. We women.
The ladies, God bless them.
I'll take that extra off mine home and sweep it off!
Perhaps your homes are alright. Perhaps you aren't living old and young, married and single in one room. I come from a place where many families have to live like that if they are going to go on living at all. If you don't believe me, come and let me show you. Come with me to Canning Town. Come with me to Bromley. Come to Pola and to Bow. No, you won't even think about the overworked women and the underfed children and the hovels they live in. And you won't that we shouldn't think neither.
We'll do the thinking. You go home and nurse the baby.
I do nurse my baby. I've nursed 7. What have you done for yours? Perhaps your children never goes hungry. Maybe you're satisfied. Though I must say I wouldn't have thought it from the look of you.
Oh, I say.
But we women are not satisfied. We don't only want better things for our children, we want better things for all. Every child is our child. We know in our hearts we oughtn't to rest till we've mothered them, every one.
Women?
Children. What about the men? Are they happy?
No, there's lots of you men I'm sorry for.
Thanks awfully.
And we'll help you if you let us.
Help us? You take the bread out of our mouths. You women are blacklegging the men.
Why does any woman take less wages than a man for the same work? Only 'cause we can't get anything better. That's part of the reason why we're here today. Do you really think we take them their low wages because we got a liking for low wages? No. We just like you. We want as much as ever we can get. We got a great deal to do with our wages, we women has. We've got the children to think about. And we've got our rights. A woman's flesh and blood won't be so much cheaper than a man's, that employers can get rich from keeping you out of work and sweating us. If you men could only see it, we got the same cause. And if you helped us, you'd be helping yourselves.
Bravo!
Who is him? Miss Ernestine Blunt will now address you.
Perhaps I'd better begin by explaining a little about our tactics.
I'm making trouble.
To make you understand what we've done, I must remind you of what others have done. Perhaps you don't know that women first petitioned Parliament for the franchise as long ago as 1866.
How do you know?
You wasn't there.
That was the trouble. Ha ha.
And the petition was presented
For an Erin now that she's got out of her cradle.
Presented to the House of Commons by that great Liberal John Stuart Mill.
Bill, who is he when he's at home?
Bills or resolutions have been before the House on and off for the last 60 years. The last 36 years. That, roughly, is our history. We found ourselves, toward the close of the year 1905, with no assurance that if we went on in the same way, any girl born into the world in this generation would live to exercise the rights of citizenship, though she lived to be 100. So, we said, all this has been in vain. We must try some other way. How did the working man get the suffrage, we asked ourselves? Well, we turned up our records and we saw...
Oh, we fought for it.
But we didn't want to follow such a violent example. We would much rather not. But if that's the only way we can make the country see we're in earnest, we are prepared to show them.
And they'll show you. Give you another month hard.
Don't think that going to prison has any fear for us. We'd go for life if by doing that we could get freedom for the rest of the women.
Why don't the men help you get your rights?
Here's someone asking why the men don't help. It's partly that they don't understand yet. They will before we're done. Partly they don't understand yet what's at stake.
Oh, Lord, they're educating of us.
What next?
And partly that the bravest man is afraid of ridicule. Oh yes, we've heard a great deal all our lives about the timidity and the sensitiveness of women, and it's true, we are sensitive. But I tell you, ridicule crumples a man up. It steals a woman. We've come to know the value of ridicule. We've educated ourselves so that we welcome ridicule. We owe our sincerest thanks to the comic writers. The cartoonist is our unconscious friend. Who cartoons people who are of no importance? What advertisement is so sure of being remembered?
I admit that.
If we didn't know it by any other sign, the comic papers would tell us we've arrived. But our greatest debt of gratitude we owe to the man who called us female hooligans. We aren't hooligans, but we hope the fact will be overlooked. If everybody said we were nice, well-behaved women, who'd come to hear us? Not the men. Men tell us it isn't womanly for us to care about politics. How do they know what's womanly? It is for women to decide that. Let the men attend to being manly. It will take them all their time.
Are we downhearted? Oh no!
And they say it would be dreadful if we got the vote, because then we'd be pitted against men in the economic struggle. But that's come about already. Do you know that out of every 100 women in this country, 82 are wage-earning women? It used to be thought unfeminine for women to be students and to aspire to the arts that bring fame and fortune. But nobody has ever said it was unfeminine for women to do the heavy drudgery that's badly paid. That kind of work had to be done by somebody, and the men didn't hanker after it. Oh no.
She can talk. The little one can.
Oh, they can all talk.
I wouldn't like to be her husband. Think of coming home to that.
I'd soon learn her.
Oh no, let the women scrub and cook and wash, that's all right. But if they want to try their hand at the better paid work of the liberal professions, oh, very unfeminine indeed, then there's another thing. Now, I want you to listen to this because it's very important. Men say if we persist in competing with them for the bigger prizes, they're dreadfully afraid we lose the beautiful, protecting chivalry that... Yes, I don't want you to laugh. We laugh. But the women I found at the Fairy Tin Works worked for 5 shillings a week. I didn't see them laughing. The beautiful chivalry of the employers of women doesn't prevent them from paying women 10 pence a day for sorting coal and loading and unloading cars. Doesn't prevent them from forcing women to earn bread in worse ways still. So we won't talk about chivalry. It's being over-sarcastic. We'll just let the poor ghost of chivalry go in exchange for a little plain justice.
If the House of Commons won't give you justice, why don't you go for the House of Lords?
What?
Better hurry up. Case never really closed it.
Enter Jeffrey Stoner, followed by Jean and Lady John in motor veils.
Is she one of them? That little thing?
I suppose so.
Oh, ask someone. Jeffrey, I'm so disappointed. I did so hope we'd hear one of the worst.
What? What do you say?
Can you tell me, my man, which are the ones that make the disturbances?
The one that's doing the talking. She's the disturbingest of the lot.
Not that nice little lady.
Don't you be took in, miss.
Oh, yes, I see. There's a man over here asking.
Oh, is it question time?
I've got a question too. Are you married?
Ha! Quick, there's your chance. He's a bachelor.
A man asking, if the women get full citizenship and a war is declared, will the women fight?
No, really. No, really now.
You know, some people say that the whole trouble about us is that we do fight, but it is only hard necessity makes us do that. We don't want to fight, as men seem to, just for fighting's sake. Women are for peace.
Hear, hear.
and we shall have a share in public affairs, there'll be less likelihood of war. But that's not to say women can't fight. The Boer women did. The Russian women faced conflicts worse than any battlefield can show. But we women know all that is evil, and we're for peace. Our part, we're proud to remember it. Our part has been to go about after you men in wartime and pick up the pieces.
Pick up the pieces.
Seems funny, doesn't it? You men blow them to bits, and then we come along and put them together again. If you know anything about military nursing, you know a good deal of our work has been done in the face of danger, but it's always been done.
That's so.
You complain that more and more we're taking away from you men the work that's always been yours. You can't any longer keep women out of the industries. The only question is upon what terms shall she continue to be in? As long as she's in on bad terms, she's only hurting herself. She's not only hurting herself, she's hurting you. But if you're feeling discouraged about our competing with you, we're willing to leave you your trade in war. Let the men take life. We give life. No one will pretend ours isn't one of the dangerous trades either. I won't say any more to you now, because we've got others to speak to you, and a new woman helper that I want you to hear.
Well?
Well...
Nothing reprehensible in what she said, was there?
Oh, reprehensible.
Makes me rather miserable, all the same.
You mustn't take it as much to heart as all that.
I can't help it. I can't indeed. Geoffrey, I shall never be able to make a speech like that.
I hope not indeed.
Why, I thought you said you wanted me.
To make nice little speeches with composure. So I did. So I...
You said...
that you have very pink cheeks? Well, I stick to that.
Don't tell everybody.
And you're the only female creature I ever saw who didn't look a fright in motor things.
I'm glad you don't think me a fright.
I will now ask to address the meeting.
Oh, don't go yet. Aunt Ellen.
Go? Certainly not. I want to hear another. I can't believe you know she was really one of the worst.
That's Pilcher.
Who's Pilcher?
If you can't afford a bottle of Thatcher, why don't you get your haircut?
Now, I've been addressing a big meeting at Hammersmith this morning. And when I told him I was coming here this afternoon to speak for the women, well, then the usual thing began. Right? In these times, if you want peace and quiet at a public meeting, now there was a man at Hammersmith too, talking about women's fear being owned. Owned, do you call it? You got a kennel where you can munch your tummy. You got a corner where you can curl up for a few hours till you go out to work again. No, my man, there's too many of you ain't able to give women homes, a fit to live in. Too many of you in that fix for you to go on jawing at those of the women who want to make their homes a little decenter.
If the vote ain't doing us any good, how will it do the women any good?
Look here, any man there belonging to the Labour Party. Well, I don't need to tell these men the vote has done us some good. They know it. And it'll do us a lot more good when you know how to use the power you got in your hand.
Power? It's those fellas at the bottom of the street that's got the power.
Oh, it's you. And men like you, they gave it to them. Yeah, you carried the Liberals into Parliament Street on your own shoulders. You believed all their fine words. You never asked yourself, what's a Liberal anyway?
He's a jolly good fellow.
Oh, yeah. Or if he is jolly, it's only because he thinks he's such silly codfish he goes swelling his majority again. It's enough to make any liberal jolly to see sheep like you looking on, proud and happy, while you see liberal leaders deserting liberal principles. You show me a liberal, and I'll show you Mr. Fashionable Ways. Yes, it sheds the light of its warm and handsome smile on the working man, and round on the other side, he's tipping a wink to the great landowners. That's to let them know he's standing between them and the socialists. Socialists, yes, socialists. The rebel. He's just a judicial sort of chap that sits in the middle.
On the fence?
Tories on one side, socialists on the other. But ain't always so comfortable in the middle. You like to get squeezed. Now, I'll say to the women, the conservatives don't promise you much. But what they promise, they do.
This fellow isn't half bad.
Of the liberals. Liberals, they'll promise you the earth and give you nothing.
Isn't it fun? Now aren't you glad that I brought you?
This chap's rather amusing.
We men have seen it happen over and over, but the women can take it in quicker than we can. They won't stand the nonsense men do, only they haven't got a fair chance even to agitate for their rights. As I was coming up here, I heard a man saying, "Look at this big crowd. Why, we're all men. If the women want the vote, why aren't they say so?" Well, I'll tell you why. It's because they've had to get the dinner for you and me, and now they're washing up our dishes.
You think we ought to stay home and wash the dishes?
If they'd leave it to us once or twice, perhaps we'd understand a little more about the woman question. I know why my wife isn't here. It's because she knows I ain't much use round the house, and she's hoping I can talk to some purpose. Maybe she's mistaken. Anyhow, here am I to vote for her and for all the other women.
Yeah.
And to tell you men what improvements you can expect to see when women has a share in public affairs they ought to have.
What do you know about it? You can't even talk grammar.
I'm not here to talk grammar, but to talk reform. I ain't defending my grammar, but I'll say in pause, if my mother had her rights, maybe my grammar would have been better. Oh, wait a minute. Half a minute, my man.
Who are you talking to? I ain't your man.
Lucky for me, there seems to be a gentleman here who doesn't think women ought to have the vote.
Hun.
Perhaps he doesn't know much about women. The gentleman says he's married. Well, then, for the sake of his wife, we mustn't be so sorry he's here. No doubt she's saying, even by prize, those women are making a demonstration in Trafalgar Fair, and I'll have a little peace and quiet and over one Sunday in my life. Well, you're like the man at Hammersmith this morning. Yeah, he was asking me, would you like men to stay at home and do the family washing?
Do the family washing.
I told him I wouldn't advise it. I've too much respect for me clothes.
It's their place. The women ought to be doing the washing.
I'm not sure you ain't right. For a good many of you fellas, from the look of you, you can't even wash yourselves.
Who are you talking to?
Which of us do you mean?
Well, it takes about 10 of your sort to make a man, so you may take it to mean I mean the lot of you.
Well, now there's another woman going to speak.
Oh, is she? Who? Which? I do hope she'll be one of the wild ones.
That's all right, then. When I've attended to this microbe that's vitiating the air on my right.
We're going now.
No, not yet. Oh, please, not yet. Why, I do believe.
I'm going to take Jean out of this mob. Will you come?
What? Oh, yes, if you think... But isn't that... Surely it is!
Vita Levering comes forward.
Jeffrey!
Lady John's tired.
What? You don't see who it is, Jeffrey.
I'll come down and attend to that microbe while Lady will say a few words to you. If she can make herself heard.
Someone suggests, and it's such a good idea, I'd like you to listen to it, that a clause shall be inserted in the next suffrage bill that shall expressly reserve each cabinet minister and to any respectable man the power to prevent the franchise being given to the female members of his party on his public declaration of their lack of sufficient intelligence to entitle them to vote. Now I ask you to listen as quietly as you can to a lady who is not accustomed to speaking in Trafalgar Square or as a matter of fact at all.
A dumb lady. Hooray! 3 cheers for the dumb lady.
A lady who, as I've said, will tell you, if you'll behave yourselves, her impression of the administration of police court justice in this country.
Mr. Chairman, men and women.
Speak up.
I just wanted to tell you that I was present in the police court when the women were charged for creating a disturbance.
To get mixed up in what don't concern you.
Now see here, man, don't interrupt.
I like this one, Dad. You can see she ain't one of them.
Oh, that's Christ. Them women behind you.
It's
It's the way that goes on.
This makes the government keep ye from getting your rights.
It's the way you go on that...
Look here, if the government withholds a vote because they don't like the way some of us ask for it, let them give it to the quiet ones. Does the government want to punish all women because they don't like the manners of a handful? Perhaps that's you men's notion of justice. It isn't women's.
Yes, this is the first time I've ever gone on, as you call it, but they never gave me a vote.
No, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 women on this platform. Now, we all want the vote, as you know. Well, we'd agree to be disenfranchised all our lives if they'd give the vote to all the other women.
Look here, you made one speak. You're the lady of Ton.
That's just what I wanted you to do.
Perhaps you don't know. You don't know.
We don't know if you can't tell us.
Thank you for that. We couldn't have a better motto. How are you to know if we can't somehow manage to tell you? Well, I certainly didn't know before that the sergeants and policemen are instructed to deceive the people as to the time such cases are heard. You ask, and you're sent to Marlborough Police Court instead of to Marylebone.
They ought to send you to Alloway. Do you good.
You go on, miss. Don't mind him.
You're told the case will be at 2:00, and it's really called for 11. Well, I took a great deal of trouble, and I didn't believe what I was told. Yes, that's almost the first thing we have to learn. To get over our touching faith that because a man tells us something, it's true. I got to the right court, and I was so anxious not to be late, I was too early. The case before the women's was just coming on. I heard a noise. At the door, I saw the helmets of 2 policemen, and I said to myself, what sort of crime shall I have to sit and hear about? Is this a burglar coming along between the 2 big policemen, or will it be a murderer? What sort of felon is to stand in the dock before the women whose crime is they ask for the vote? But try as I would, I couldn't see the prisoner. My heart misgave me. Is it a woman, I wondered? Then the policeman got nearer and I saw a little, thin, half-starved boy. What do you think he was charged with? Stealing? What had he been stealing? That small criminal? Milk. It seemed to me as I sat there looking on that the men who had the affairs of the world in their hands from the beginning and who've made so poor a business of it.
Oh, poor benighted man. Are we downhearted? Oh, no.
So poor a business of it as to have the poor and the unemployed in the condition they're in today, when your only remedy for a starving child is to hail him off to the police court because he had managed to get a little milk? Well, I did wonder that the men refused to be helped with a problem they've so notoriously failed at. I began to say to myself, isn't it time the women lent a hand?
Would you have women magistrates?
Oh, magistrates.
Women. Let them prove first they deserve.
They study music by thousands. Where's their Beethoven? Where's their Plato? Where's the woman Shakespeare?
Yeah, what have they ever done?
These questions are quite proper. They're often asked elsewhere, and I would like to ask in return. Since when was human society held to exist for its handful of geniuses? How many Platos are there here in this crowd? Not one. Yet that doesn't keep you men off the register. How many Shakespeares are there in all England today? Not one. Yet the state doesn't tumble to pieces. Railroads and ships are built, homes are kept going, and babies are born. The world goes on. It goes on by virtue of its common people. I am not concerned that you should think we women can paint great pictures or compose immortal music or write good books. I am content that we should be chaste with the common people who keep the world going. But I'd like the world to go a great deal better. We were talking about justice. I have been inquiring into the kind of lodging the poorest class of homeless women can get in this town of London. I find that only the men of that class are provided for. Some measure to establish Roton houses for women has been before the London County Council. They looked into the question very carefully, so their apologists say. And what did they decide? They decided that they could do nothing.
Is that true?
I don't know.
Why could that great, all-powerful body do nothing? Because if these cheap and decent houses were opened, they said, the homeless women in the streets would make use of them. You'll think I'm not in earnest, but that was actually the decision and the reason given for it. Women that the bitter struggle for existence has forced into a life of horror.
You think this kind of thing...
The outcast women might take advantage of the shelter these decent, cheap places offered. But the men, I said, after all, who avail themselves of Lord Roton's hostels, are they all angels? Or does wrongdoing in a man not matter? Yet women are recommended to depend on the chivalry of men. Justice and chivalry! They both remind me of what those of you who read the police court news, I've begun only lately to do that, but you've seen the accounts of the girl who's been tried in Manchester lately for the murder of her child. Not pleasant reading. Even if we'd noticed it, we wouldn't speak of it in my world. A few months ago, I should have turned away my eyes and forgotten even the headline as quickly as I could. But since that morning in the police court, I read these things. This, as you'll remember, was about a little working girl, an orphan of 18 who crawled with the dead body of her newborn child to her master's back door and left the baby there. She dragged herself a little way off and fainted. A few days later, she found herself in court, being tried for the murder of her child. Her master, a married man, had of course reported the find at his back door to the police, and he had been summoned to give evidence. The girl cried out to him in the open court, "You are the father!" He couldn't deny. The coroner, at the jury's request, censured the man and regretted that the law didn't make him responsible. But he went scot-free. And that girl is now serving her sentence in Strangeways jail.
Why do you dislike her so?
Why should you think...
I never saw you look as you did, as you do.
Order, please. Give the lady a fair...
Men make boast that an English citizen is tried by his peers. What woman is tried by hers? A woman is arrested by a man, brought before a man judge, tried by a jury of men, condemned by men, taken to prison by a man, and by a man she's hanged! Where in all this were her peers? Why did men so long ago insist on trial by a jury of their peers? So that justice shouldn't miscarry, wasn't it? A man's peers would best understand his circumstances, his temptation, the degree of his guilt. Yet there's no such unlikeness between different classes of men as exists between man and woman. What man has the knowledge that makes him a fit judge of woman's deeds at that time of anguish, that hour that some woman struggled through to put each man here into the world? I noticed when a previous speaker quoted the Labour Party, you applauded. Some of you here, I gather, call yourselves Labour men. Every woman who has borne a child is a Labour woman. No man among you can judge what she goes through in her hour of darkness.
Geoffrey.
In that great agony when, even under the best conditions that money and devotion can buy, many a woman falls into temporary mania, and not a few go down to death. In the case of this poor, little abandoned working girl, what man can be the fit judge of her deeds in that awful moment of half-crazed temptation? Women know of these things as those know burning who have walked through fire. I would say in conclusion to the women here, it's not enough to be sorry for these, our unfortunate sisters. We must get the condition of life made fairer. We women must organize. We must learn to work together. We have all, rich and poor, happy and unhappy, worked so long and so exclusively for men. We hardly know how to work for one another. But we must learn. Those who can may give money.
Oh, yes, money.
Those who haven't pennies to give, even those people who aren't so poor they can't give some part of their labor, some share of their sympathy and support.
Oh, I'm glad you've got power.
Power? You?
Yes, all that money.
Oh, yes. I hope you'll all join the union. Come up after the meeting and give your names.
You won't get many men.
Then it's to the women I appeal! I don't mean to say it wouldn't be better if men and women did this work together, shoulder to shoulder, but the mass of men won't have it so. I only hope they'll realize in time the good they've renounced and the spirit they've aroused. For I know as well as any man could tell me, it would be a bad day for England if all women felt about all men as I do.
She exits.
Here, follow me.
No,
You're going the wrong way.
This is the way I must go.
You can get out quicker on this side.
I don't want to get out.
What? Where are you going?
To ask that woman to let me have the honor of working with her.
End of Act 2. Act 3. The drawing room at old Mr. Dunbarton's house in Eaton Square. 6 o'clock the same evening. As the curtain rises, the door opens and Jean appears on the threshold. She looks back into her own sitting room and crosses the drawing room, treading softly on the parquet spaces between the rugs. She goes to the window and is in the act of parting the lace curtains when the folding doors are opened by the butler.
Speak low, please.
I waited about a whole hour for you to come back. If you didn't mind leaving me like that, you might have considered Lady John.
Is she here with you?
No. My place was nearer than this, and she is very tired. I left her to go get some tea. We couldn't tell whether you'd be here or what had become of you.
Mr. Trent got us a hansom.
Trent?
The chairman of the meeting?
Got us?
Miss Levering and me.
Miss Levering?
Mr. Farnborough.
Last, you'll forgive this incursion, Miss Dunbarton, when you hear they've been telegraphing you all over London. In despair, they set me up on your track.
Who did? What's up?
There was the devil to pay at Dutfield last night. The Liberal chap tore down from London and took over your meeting.
Oh? Nothing about it in the Sunday paper I saw.
Wait until you see the press tomorrow morning. There was a great rally, and the beggar made a rousing speech.
What about?
Abolition of the upper house.
They were at that when I was at Eton.
Yes, but this new man has a way of putting things. The people went mad. The Liberal platform, as defined at Dutfield, is going to make a big difference.
You think so?
Well, your agent says as much.
Try find Stoner.
Tremendous effort of last night's Liberal manifesto ought to be counteracted in tomorrow's papers. You see, Mr. Stoner, it's a battle cry we want.
Trap.
Well, they've been saying we have nothing to offer but personal popularity. No practical reform,
No truckling to the masses, I suppose.
Well, in these democratic days. I hope you'll forgive my bursting in like this. But I can see you realize the gravity. It isn't as if he were going to be a mere private member. Everybody knows he'll be in the cabinet.
It may be a Liberal cabinet.
Nobody thought so until last night. Why, even your brother. But I'm afraid I'm seeming officious.
What about my brother?
I met Lord Windlesham as I rushed out of the Carlton.
Did he say anything?
I told him the Dutfield news.
Well?
He said it only confirmed his fears.
Said that, did he?
Yes. Defeat is inevitable, he thinks, unless you can manufacture some political dynamite within the next few hours. Those were his words.
You are very tired.
No.
I'm obliged to you for taking so much trouble. I'll see what can be done.
If you'd like to wire, I can take it.
You don't understand, my young friend. Moves of this kind are not rushed by responsible politicians. I must have time for consideration.
Oh. Well, I can only hope that someone else won't jump into the breach before you. I tell you, I'll find out what time the newspapers go to press on Sunday. Goodbye. I'll be at the club just in case I can be of any use.
No, don't do that. If I should have anything new to say...
But with our party, as your brother said, heading straight for a vast electoral disaster.
If I decide on a counterblast, I shall simply telegraph to headquarters. Goodbye.
Oh. Goodbye.
Political dynamite, eh? After all, women are much more conservative than men, aren't they? Especially the women the property qualification would bring in. You see now, one reason why I've encouraged you to take an interest in public affairs, because people like us don't go screaming about it, is no sign we don't, some of us, see what's on the way. However little they want to, women of our class will have to come into line. All the best things in the world, everything that civilization has won, will be in danger if, when this change comes, the only women who have practical political training are the women of the lower classes. Women of the lower classes and women inoculated by socialist virus.
Jeffrey.
Let us see, how shall I put it? When the time comes, shall we... That's right. Enough dynamite in that. Rather too much, isn't it there, little girl?
Jeffrey, I know her story.
Whose story?
Miss Levering's.
Whose?
Vida Levering's. Why did you desert her?
I?
Oh, why did you do it?
What in the name of... What has she been saying to you?
Someone else told me part. Then the way you looked when you saw her at Aunt Ellen's. Miss Levering saying you didn't know her. Then you're letting out that you knew even the curious name on the handkerchief. Oh, I pieced it together.
Your ingenuity is undeniable.
And then, when she said that at the meeting about the dark hour, and I looked at your face, it flashed over me. Why did you desert her?
I didn't desert her.
I'm glad. I'm glad. She went away from you then.
Oh, you don't expect me to enter into this.
She went away from you.
Yes.
Was that because you wouldn't marry her?
I couldn't marry her. She knew it.
Did you want to?
I thought I did. I thought I did it then. It's a long time ago.
And why couldn't you?
Why are you catechizing me? It's a matter that concerns another woman.
If you're saying that it doesn't concern me, you're saying that you don't concern me.
In those days, I was absolutely dependent on my father.
Why, you must have been 30, Jeffrey.
What? No, thereabouts.
And everybody says you're so clever.
Well, everyone's mistaken.
It must have been terribly hard. For you both. That a man like you shouldn't have had the freedom that even Lois seemed to have.
Freedom?
To marry the woman they choose.
She didn't break off our relations because I couldn't marry her.
Why? Why was it then?
You're too young to discuss such a story.
I'm not so young as she was.
Very well then. If you will have it, the truth is it didn't seem to weigh upon her as it seems to on you that I wasn't able to marry her.
Why are you so sure of that?
Because she didn't even so much as hint such a thing when she wrote that she meant to break off the...
What made her write like that?
Why will you go on talking of what's so long over and ended?
What reason did she give?
If your curiosity has so got the upper hand, ask her.
You're afraid to tell me.
I still hoped, at that time, to win my father over. She blamed me. If the child had lived, it wouldn't have been possible to get my father to overlook it.
You wanted it to be overlooked. I don't understand why.
Of course you don't. If you did, you wouldn't be the beautiful, tender, innocent child you are.
I'm glad you didn't mean to desert her, Jeffrey. It wasn't your fault, after all. Only some misunderstanding that can be cleared up.
Cleared up?
Yes, cleared up.
You aren't thinking that this miserable old affair I'd as good as forgotten can be...
Oh, forgotten?
No. I don't mean exactly forgotten, but you're torturing me so I don't know what I'm saying. You aren't... Jean, you aren't going to let it come between you and me.
I can't make or unmake what's past. But I'm glad, at least, that you didn't mean to desert her in her trouble. You'll remind her of that, first of all, won't you?
Where are you going? Why should I remind anybody of what I only want to forget? You don't mean that she's...
Yes, I left her to get a little rest. Jeffrey, don't go before you hear me. I don't know if what I think matters to you now, but I hope it does. you can still make me think of you without shrinking. If you will.
What is it you are asking of me?
To make amends, Geoffrey.
You poor little innocent.
I'm poor enough, but I'm not so innocent. But what I know, you must right that old wrong now, if you're ever to right it.
You aren't insane enough to think I would turn round in these few hours and go back to something that 10 years ago was ended forever. Why, it's stark madness.
No. What you did 10 years ago, that was mad. This is paying a debt.
Look here, Jean. You're dreadfully wrought up and excited. Tired, too.
No, not tired. Though I've traveled so far today, I know you smile at sudden conversions. You think they're hysterical, worse, vulgar. But people must get their revelation how they can. And Geoffrey, if I can't make you see this one of mine, I shall know your love could never mean strength to me, only weakness. And I shall be afraid. So afraid I'll never dare to give you the chance of making me loathe myself. I shall never see you again.
How right I was to be afraid of that vein of fanaticism in you.
Certainly, you couldn't make a greater mistake than to go away now and think it any good to ever come back. Even if I came to feel different, I couldn't do anything different. I should know all this couldn't be forgotten. I should know that if it would poison my life in the end, yours too.
She has made good use of her time. What has changed her? Has she been seeing visions too?
What do you mean?
Why is she intriguing to get a hold of a man that 10 years ago she flatly refused to see or hold any communication with?
Intriguing to get hold of? She hasn't even mentioned you.
What? Then how in the name of heaven do you know that she wants what you ask?
There can't be any doubt about that.
Oh, you absurd, ridiculous child. Then all of this is just your own unaided invention. Well, I could thank God.
For what are you thanking God?
I suppose, I'm not going to risk it, but suppose, whether I deserve to suffer or not, it's quite certain you don't. Don't cry, dear one. It never was a real thing. I had to wait till I knew you before I understood.
Is that true? Loving you has made things very clear to me I didn't dream of before. If I could think that because of me you were able to do this.
Look here. Do you seriously ask me to give up the girl I love, to go and offer to marry a woman that even to think of makes me...
You cared for her once. You'll care about her again. She is beautiful and brilliant, everything. I've heard she could win any man she set herself to.
She's bewitched you.
Jeffrey, you aren't going away like that. This isn't the end.
I suppose even if she refused me, you'd...
She won't refuse you.
She did once.
She didn't refuse to marry you.
Wait, Lady John is waiting all this while for the car to go back with a message.
That's not a matter of life and death.
All the same, I'll go down and give the order.
Very well. You'll come back if you're the man I pray you are.
Dearest of all the world.
The door opens and Vita Levering appears.
What is the matter?
I've been seeing Jeffrey.
Is this the effect seeing Jeffrey has?
You see, I know now how he spoiled someone else's life.
Who tells you that?
Several people have told me.
Well, you should be very careful how you believe what you hear.
You know it's true.
I know that it's possible to be mistaken.
I see. You're trying to shield him.
Why should I? What is it to me?
How you must love him.
Listen to me.
What's the use of your going on denying it? Jeffrey doesn't. Oh, don't look like that. I shall bring him back to you.
You would be impertinent if you weren't a romantic child. You can't bring him back.
Yes,
But there's something you can do.
What?
Bring him to the point where he recognizes that he's in our debt.
In our debt?
In debt to women. He can't repay the one he robbed.
Yes.
No, he can't repay the dead. But there are the living. There are the thousands with hope still in their hearts and youth in their blood. Let him help them. Let him be a friend to women.
Yes. I understand that.
The door opens. Stoner enters with Lady John.
Thank you.
Well, you rather gave us the slip. Vida, I believe Mr. Stoner wants to see you for a few minutes. But I'd like a word with you first, as I must get back. Do you think the car, your man said something about recharging?
Oh, did he? I'll see about it.
Mr. Trent has called. Take Miss Levering to the meeting.
Bring Mr. Trent into my sitting room. I'll tell him you can't go tonight.
Exit the butler and Jean.
I know, my dear. You're not aware of what that impulsive girl wants to insist on.
Yes, I am aware of it.
But it isn't with your sanction, surely, that she goes on making this extraordinary demand.
I didn't sanction it at first, but I've been thinking it over.
Then all I can say is I am greatly disappointed in you. You threw this man over years ago for reasons, whatever they were, that seemed to you good and sufficient. And now you come between him and a younger woman just to play nemesis, so far as I can make out?
Is that what he says?
He says nothing that isn't fair and considerate.
I can see he's changed.
And you're unchanged. Is that it?
I've changed even more than he.
But you care about him still, Vida?
No.
I see. It's just that you wish to marry somebody.
Oh, Lady John, there are no men listening.
No, I didn't suppose there were.
Then why keep up that old pretense?
What pretense?
That to marry at all costs is every woman's dearest ambition till the grave closes over her. You and I know it isn't true.
Well, but... Oh, it was just the unexpected sight of him bringing it back. That was what fired you this afternoon. Of course. The memory of a thing like that can never die, can never be dimmed for the woman.
I mean her to think so.
Jean? And it isn't so?
You don't seriously believe a woman with anything else to think about comes to the end of 10 years still absorbed in a memory of that sort?
You've got over it, then.
If the newspapers didn't remind me, I shouldn't remember once a 12-month that there was ever such a person as Geoffrey Stoner in the world.
Oh, I am so glad.
Yes, I'm glad too.
And if Geoffrey Stoner offered you what's called reparation, you'd refuse it?
Geoffrey Stoner? For me, he's simply one of the far-back links in a chain of evidence. It's certain I think 100 times of other women's present unhappiness to once that I remember that old unhappiness of mine that's past. I think of the nail and chain makers of Cradley Heath, the sweated girls of the slums. I think of the army of ill-used women whose very existence...
Then why in heaven's name do you let poor Jean imagine?
Look! I'll trust you, Lady John. I don't suffer from that old wrong as Jean thinks I do. But I shall coin her sympathy into gold for a greater cause than mine.
I don't understand you.
Jean isn't old enough to be able to care as much about a principle as about a person. But if my half-forgotten pain can turn her generosity into the common treasure...
What do you propose she shall do, poor child?
Use her hold over Geoffrey Stoner to make him help us.
Help you?
The man who served one woman, God knows how many more, very ill, shall serve hundreds of thousands well. Geoffrey Stoner shall make it harder for his son, harder still for his grandson, to treat any woman as he treated me.
How will he do that?
By putting an end to the helplessness of women.
You must think he has a great deal of power.
Power? Yes. Men have too much over penniless and frightened women.
What nonsense! You talk as though the women hadn't their share of human nature. We aren't made of ice any more than the men.
No, but all the same, we have more self-control.
Than men?
You know we have.
I know we mustn't admit it.
For fear they'd call us fishes.
They talk of our lack of self-control, but it's the last thing they want women to have.
Now we know what they want us to have, so we make shift to have it. If we don't, we go without hope. Sometimes we go without bread.
Vida, do you mean to say that...
I mean to say that men's vanity won't let them see it, but the thing's largely a question of economics.
You never loved him then?
Oh, yes, I loved him. Once. It was my helplessness turned the best thing life can bring into a curse for both of us.
I don't understand you.
Oh, being understood. That's too much to expect. When people come to know I've joined the union...
But you won't.
Who is there who will resist the temptation to say, poor Vida Levering, What a pity she hasn't got a husband and a baby to keep her quiet. The few who know about me, they'll be equally sure that it's not the larger view of life I've gained. My own poor little story is responsible for my new departure. My best friend, she will be surest of all that it's a private sense of loss, or lower yet, a grudge. But I tell you, the only difference between me and thousands of women with husbands and babies is that I'm free to say what I think. They aren't.
I must get back. My poor ill-used guests.
I won't ring. I think you'll find Mr. Stoner downstairs, waiting for you.
Oh, he will have left word about the car in any case.
Miss Levering opens the door. Ellen Trent is in the act of saying goodbye to Jean in the hall.
Well, Mr. Trent, I didn't expect to see you this evening.
Why not? Have I ever failed?
Lady John, this is one of our allies. He is good enough to squire me through the rabble from time to time.
Well, I think it's very handsome of you after what she said today about men.
Oh, I've no great opinion of most men myself, I might add, or of most women.
Oh. Well, at any rate, I shall go away relieved to think that Miss Levering's plain speaking hasn't alienated all masculine regard.
Why should it?
That's right, Mr. Trent. Don't believe all she says in the heat of propaganda.
I do believe all she says, but I'm not cast down.
Not when she says.
Was there ever never a misogynist of my sex who ended by deciding to make an exception?
Oh, if that's what you build on.
Well, why shouldn't a man-hater on your side prove equally open to reason?
That part of the question doesn't concern me. I've come to a place where I realize that the first battles of the new campaign must be fought by women alone. The only effective help men can give, amendment of the law, they refuse. The rest is nothing.
Don't be ungrateful, Vida. Here's Mr. Trent ready to face criticism in publicly championing you.
It is an illusion that I, as an individual, need Mr. Trent. I'm quite safe in the crowd. Please don't wait for me and don't come for me again.
Of course, if you'd rather.
And that reminds me. I was asked to thank you and to tell you too that they, the women of the union, they won't need your chairmanship anymore. Though that, I beg you to believe, has nothing to do with any feeling of mine.
Of course. I know that there must be other men ready, better known men.
It isn't that. It's simply that they find a man can't keep a rowdy meeting in order as well as a woman.
You aren't serious.
Haven't you noticed that all their worst disturbances come from men when men are in charge?
Well, I hadn't connected the two ideas. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That nice boy's in love with you. Goodbye. I wish you hadn't been so unkind to that nice boy.
Do you?
Yes. For then I would be more certain of your telling Geoffrey Stoner that intelligent women don't nurse their wrongs and lie in wait to punish them.
You are not certain?
Are you?
To Geoffrey Stoner.
Well, have they primed you? Have you got your lesson by heart, at least?
I am not sure I understand you. However unpropitious your mood may be, I shall discharge my errand. I have promised to offer you what I believe is called Amends.
You've come to realize then, after all these years, that you owed me something?
I'm not here to deny it.
Pay then. Pay.
I have promised that if you exact it, I will.
Ah, if I insist you'll make it all good, then don't you know you must pay me in kind?
What do you mean?
Give me back what you took from me. My old faith. Give me that.
Oh, if you mean to make phrases.
Or give me back mere kindness, or even tolerance. Oh, I don't mean your tolerance. Give me back the power to think fairly of my brothers, not as mockers, thieves.
I have not mocked you, and I have asked you.
Something you knew I should refuse, or did you dare to be afraid I wouldn't?
I suppose if we set our teeth, we could.
I couldn't, not even if I set my teeth. And you wouldn't dream of asking me if you thought there was the smallest chance.
I can do more than make you an offer of such reparation as in my power. If you don't accept it...
Accept it! No! Go away and live in debt. Pay and pay and pay, and find yourself still in debt for a thing you'll never be able to give me back. And when you come to die, say to yourself, I paid all creditors but one.
I'm rather tired, you know, of this talk of debt. If I hear that you persist in it, I shall have to...
What?
No. I'll keep my resolution.
What resolution?
I came here under considerable pressure to speak of the future, not reopen the past.
The future and the past are one.
You talk as if that old madness was mine alone. It is the woman's way.
I know. And it's not fair. Men suffer as well as we by the woman starting wrong. We are taught to think the man a sort of demigod. If he tells her, go down into hell, down into hell she goes.
Make no mistake. Not the woman alone. They go down together.
Yes, they go down together, but the man comes up alone. As a rule, it is more convenient so for him and for the other woman.
My conscience is clear. I know, and so do you, that most men in my position wouldn't have troubled themselves. I gave myself endless trouble.
So you've gone about all these years feeling that you'd discharged every obligation.
Not only that, I stood by you with a fidelity that was nothing short of quixotic. If, woman-like, you must recall the past, I insist on you recalling it correctly.
You think I don't recall it correctly?
Not when you make other people believe that I deserted you. If it's a curious enough charge when you stop to consider...
Well, when we do, just for 5 minutes out of 10 years, when we do stop to consider...
We remember it was you who did the deserting. Since you had to rake the story up, you might as well have had the fairness to tell the facts.
You think the facts would have excused you?
No doubt you've forgotten them, since Lady John tells me you wouldn't remember my existence once a year if the newspapers didn't.
Ah, you minded that.
I minded your giving false impressions. Do you deny that you returned my letters unopened?
No.
Do you deny that you refused to see me, and that when I persisted, you vanished?
I don't deny any of those things.
Why, I had no trace of you for years.
I suppose not.
Very well, then. What could I do?
Nothing. It was too late to do anything.
It wasn't too late. You knew, since you read the papers, that my father died that same year. There was no longer any barrier between us.
Oh, yes, there was a barrier.
Of your own making, then.
I had my guilty share in. But the barrier was your invention.
It was no invention. If you had ever known my father.
Oh, the echoes, the echoes. How often you used to say, if I knew your father. But you said too. You called the greatest barrier by another name.
What name?
The child that was to come.
That was before my father died, while I still hoped to get his consent.
How the thought of that all-powerful personage used to terrorize me. What chance had a little unborn child against the last of the great feudal lords, as you called him?
You know the child would have stood between you and me.
I know. The child did stand between you and me.
It did stand.
Happy mothers teach their children. Mine had to teach me.
You talk as if...
Teach me that a woman may do a thing for love's sake that shall kill love.
You certainly made it plain. You had no love left for me.
I had need of it all for the child.
Do you mean then that, after all, it lived?
No. I mean that it was sacrificed. But it showed me no barrier is so impassable as the one a little child can raise.
Was that why you... Was that why?
Day and night there it was, between my thought of you and me. When I was most unhappy, I would wake thinking I heard it cry. It was my own crying I heard, but I seemed to have it in my heart. I suppose I was mad. I used to lie there in that lonely farmhouse, pretending to hush it. It was so I hushed myself.
I never knew.
I didn't blame you. You couldn't risk being with me.
You agreed that for both our sakes.
Yes, you had to be very circumspect. You were so well known. Your autocratic father, your brilliant political future.
Be fair. Our future, as I saw it then.
Yes. It all hung on concealment. It must have looked quite simple to you. You didn't know that the ghost of a child that had never seen the light, the frail thing you meant to sweep aside and forget, have swept aside and forgotten, you didn't know. It was strong enough to push you out of my life. It can do more. It can push that girl out. It can do more still.
Are you threatening me?
No, I am preparing you.
For what?
For the work that must be done. Either with your help or that girl's. One of two things. Either her life and all she has given to this new service, or a ransom if I give her up to you.
I see. A price. Well?
Even if I could trust you to pay. No. It would be a poor bargain to give her up for anything you could do.
In spite of your assumption, she may not be your tool.
You are horribly afraid she is. But you are wrong. Don't think it's merely I that have got hold of Jean Dumbarton.
Who else?
The new spirit that's abroad. How else should that inexperienced girl have felt the new loyalty and responded as she did?
You indeed, however little loyal.
Loyal above all, but no nearer than electricity was when it first lit up the world. It had been there since the world began, waiting to do away with the dark. So has the thing you're fighting.
The thing I'm fighting is nothing more than one person's hold on a highly sensitive imagination. I consented to this interview with the hope. It only remains for me to show her your true motive is revenge.
Once, say that to her, and you are lost. I know what it is that men fear. It even seems as if it might be through fear that your enlightenment will come. That is why I see a value in Jean Dumbarton far beyond her fortune. More than any girl I know, if I keep her from you, that gentle, inflexible creature could rouse in men the old, half-superstitious fear.
Fear. I believe you are mad.
Mad, unsexed. These are the words today. In the Middle Ages, men cried out, "Witch!" and burnt her. The woman who served no man's bed or board.
You want to make that poor child believe...
She sees for herself. We've come to a place where we find there's a value in women apart from the value men see in them. You teach us not to look to you for some of the things we need most. If women must be freed by women, we have need of such as... Who knows? She may be the new Joan of Arc.
That she should be the sacrifice.
You have taught us to look very calmly on the sacrifice of women. Men tell us in every tongue, it's a necessary evil. One girl's happiness against a thing nobler than happiness for thousands. Who can hesitate? Not Jean.
Good God. Can't you see that this crazed campaign you'd start her on, even if it's successful, it can only be so through the help of men? What excuse shall you make your own soul for not going straight to the goal?
You think we wouldn't be glad to go straight to the goal?
I do. I see you'd much rather punish me and see her revel in a morbid self-sacrifice.
You say I want to punish you only because, like most men, you won't take the trouble to understand what we do want or how determined we ought to have it. You can't kill the new spirit among women. And you couldn't make a greater mistake than to think it finds a home only in the exceptional or the unhappy. It's so strange, Geoffrey, to see a man like you as much deluded as the Hard Park loafers who say to Ernestine Blunt, "Who's hurt your feelings?" Why not realize this is a thing that goes deeper than personal experience? And yet, if you take only the narrowest personal view, a good deal depends on what you and I agree upon in the next 5 minutes.
You recommended my realizing the larger issues, but in your ambition to attach that girl to the chariot wheels of progress, you quite ignore the fact that people fitter for such work, the men you look to enlist in the end, are ready, waiting to give the thing a chance.
Men are ready! What men?
Women have themselves to blame that the question has grown so delicate that responsible people shrink, for the moment, from being implicated in it.
We have seen the shrinking.
Without quoting anyone else, I might point out that the new antagonism seems to have blinded you to the small fact that I, for one, am not your opponent.
The phrase has a familiar ring. We have heard it from 420 others.
I spoke, if I may say so, of someone who would count. Someone who can carry his party along with him. Or risk a seat in the cabinet.
Did you mean you're ready to do that?
An hour ago I was.
Ah, an hour ago.
Exactly. You don't understand men. They can be led. They can't be driven. 10 minutes before you came into the room, I was ready to say I would throw in my political lot with this reform.
And now?
Now you block my way by attempted coercion. By forcing my hand, you give my adherents an air of bargain driving for the personal end. Exactly the mistake of the ignorant agitators of your union, as you call it. You have a great deal to learn. This movement will go forward, not because of the agitation, but in spite of it. There are men in Parliament who would have been actively serving the reform today, as actively as so vast a constitutional change.
And they haven't done it because...
Because it would have put a premium on breaches of decent behavior. Look here.
This is very good. I see only one objection.
Objection?
You haven't sent it.
That is your fault.
When did you write this?
Just before you came in, when...
Ah, it must have pleased Jean, that message. I could drive a hard and fast bargain with you, but I think I won't. If both love and ambition urge you on, perhaps. After all, life hasn't been quite fair to you. You fall out of one ardent woman's dream into another's.
You may as well tell me. Do you mean to...
Keep you and her apart? No.
What can I do for you? For the real you, not the reformer, or the would-be politician, for the woman I so unwillingly hurt. You may not believe it, but now that I understand, there is almost nothing I wouldn't do to right that old wrong.
There's nothing to be done. You can never give me back my child.
Will that ghost give you no rest?
Yes. Oh, yes, I see life is nobler than I knew. There is work to do.
Why should you think that it's only you? These 10 years have taught something too. Why not give even a man credit for a willingness to learn something of life, and for being sorry, profoundly sorry, for the pain his instruction has cost others? You seem to think I've taken it all quite lightly. That's not fair. All my life, ever since you disappeared, the thought of you has hurt. I would give anything I possess to know you were happy again.
Oh, happiness.
Why shouldn't you find it still?
I see. She couldn't help telling about Alan Trent. Lady John couldn't.
You're one of the people the years have not taken from, but given more to. You are more than ever You haven't lost your beauty.
The gods saw it was so little effectual, it wasn't worth taking away. One woman's mishap? What is that? A thing as trivial to the great world as it's sordid in most eyes. But the time has come when a woman may look about her and say, what general significance has my secret pain? Does it join on to anything? And I find it does. I'm no longer merely a woman who has stumbled on the way. I'm one who has got up bruised and bleeding, wiped the dust from her hands and the tears from her face, and said to herself, not merely, here's one luckless woman, but here is a stone of stumbling to many. Let's see if it can't be moved out of other women's way. And she calls people to come and to help. No mortal man, let alone a woman by herself, can move that rock of offense. But if many help, Geoffrey, the thing can be done.
Lord, how you care.
Don't be so sad. Shall I tell you a secret? Jean's ardent dreams needn't frighten you if she has a child. That, from the beginning, it was not the strong arm, it was the weakest, the little arms that subdued the fiercest of us. You will have other children, Geoffrey. For me, there was to be only one. Well. Since men alone have tried and failed to make a decent world for the little children to live in, it's as well some of us are childless. Yes, we are the ones who have no excuse for standing aloof from the fight.
Vida.
What?
You've forgotten something.
As she looks back, he is signing the message.
Geoffrey Stoner. This.
She exits silently with the political dynamite in her hand. End of play. Thank you for joining us for Votes for Women. A big thanks to our friend, Your Friendly Neighborhood Shakespeare. Visit him at his website, shakespeareapproves.com, or on Facebook at Shakespeare Approves, Your Friendly Neighborhood Shakespeare. We've got links to all his content and more in the comments of this video. Thank you to Haley and Ashley, our interpreter interns for this evening. And a big thanks also to all of the actors who volunteered to read with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us from 4 countries, 5 time zones, 4 continents, a lot of places. Thank you all so much for being here with us in humble little New Jersey. If you in the audience have enjoyed this reading, all of our past readings are available on our Facebook page and a little bit organized on our website, zenithplayers.com. If you want more information on us, including how to be involved in a reading like this one and be one of the beautiful faces you see around me, go to our Facebook page, Zenith Players, send us a message or send an email to casting@zenithplayers.com, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. We want to continue to express our support to everyone out there working to keep us safe and healthy and vaccinated. Join us next Saturday for Dear Brutus by J.M. Barrie. That's our artistic director, Claire. She cast this show, so thank her for who's in what role tonight. Join us next Saturday for Dear Brutus by J.M. Barrie. Thank you, and good night.